Now, the way I think it can be very helpful to work on this music, let's see. So, this is a particular genre of prelude in Bach called a pattern prelude.
Mm-hmm.
So, Bach wrote, every conceivable kind of prelude, but there's a very, actually very beautiful kind, like the first prelude in the World Harmonic Clavier. Or the famous one we play on the guitar. Perhaps based on lute traditions, although they're very natural to play on the keyboard, where there's a chord and then you do some arpeggio pattern, and in a slightly more sophisticated kind of it, as in the second prelude of the World Harmonic Clavier. There's an extra little bit of decoration incorporated into the arpeggio, such as a neighbor note or a passing tone. And in this case, we have, this is very like the first prelude in the World Harmonic Clavier, isn't it? It's got an arpeggio and a neighbor note. Every now and again, there's a little bit of scale movement. And then by the second part of the prelude, the scales have actually taken over. Although the scales are still describe harmonic motion, And then there's even a passage towards the end where, in the cello version, Bach is playing against an open string. Or a different open string. In a technique that string players call barriolage. So what we find is that the chords that this piece is describing actually follow very common patterns found in very common harmonic progressions found in other pattern preludes.
Mm-hmm.
And I can see, looking at your copy of the music, that you've done great work identifying all of the chords. And so what I want to do is build on this work you've done by actually having you play the chords without the pattern.
Okay.
And then think about how would you play this piece if it was a chorale, if it was a hymn tune. Is that something you've done? Is that part of the way you practice this piece?
Yeah, when I was identifying all the chords, I did that a couple times.
Yeah, now, first of all, congratulations. Really glad you did that. One little refinement, though. Sometimes when people say, yes, I did do this, a couple of times is something I often hear, and at some point, in the
Yeah,
past.
yeah.
And what I think you would find really interesting is to do it every time you practice this piece, hundreds of times. What do you remember? Do you want to try just the first 2 or 3 lines
Yeah,
playing the chords? I don't want to put you on the spot, but
sure. Should I include the like the first chord has the D in it? Should I include that with it or no?
right, only chord tones. So
Only
we
chord
just hear
tones.
the pure harmonies.
Got it.
I'm actually going to stop you right there
Mm-hmm.
because that was great. What I heard you do was first of all play perfectly accurate chords, and I noticed that when you came to the third chord, um, you played a G7 chord over the C pedal,
Yeah,
and you rolled it, and you gave it a lot of love, didn't you?
yeah.
You kind of made that the highlight of the entire progression.
Mm-hmm.
Do that again then. Just do the same thing.
Sure.
Good, and then you really resolve it very gently in the next measure. Now
Mm-hmm.
there are lots of ways of shaping this particular progression. There really are, including hardly shaping it at all is an option. After all, the chords are the chords. But you've got your response, and that's what I want to build on. Now, what if you let's do something like this. You've just done what you've done a couple of times. Now let's hear what I'm doing. I'm making kind of an eighth note arpeggio pattern.
Okay.
Just vaguely copies what Bach did, only in eighth notes without the neighbor note still. Does that make sense what I'm doing?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are you
It,
so
it,
it's
it, all I'm really doing, Matt, is I'm playing the bass note and then just the last 3 notes of each pattern,
okay,
and making it into an eighth note pattern.
like that?
That's right.
Got it.
Now try that and see if you can. But can you make it? Imagine that I was playing along with you. I can't over zoom. And
Right.
let's say we've made a recording, and in the recording we hear you playing the way you did.
Yeah.
Now, how would you play if someone was doing that with you?
Okay.
Good.
Yeah, let me try
Now,
that again. I wasn't.
yes, that's what I was going to say because it was really promising.
Mhm.
So why you yeah just do it again. Beautiful. So first you found the chords, which I think it's clear. I mean, this is actually the same chord progression that you find at the beginning of many Bach preludes.
Right.
Pattern on pattern. Sometimes with a consistent pedal, sometimes with weak bass note inversions. In other words, making C the tonic strong, as in the
Right.
first prelude to the Well Tempered Clavier, or with the C pedal, as in the second prelude in the Well Tempered Clavier, or the first prelude of Book 2 of the Well Tempered Clavier. And so it makes a lot of sense, I think, to think of the chords that Bach must have been thinking of using. He must have said,
Mhm.
"Oh, I'll just do my usual four chord opening where I just establish the tonic, and then I'll take it from there. Oh, and here's a beautiful pattern." So we start with the chords. Then we made a simple version of the pattern in which you gave the same expression that you gave the chords. Now, are you ready to play Bach's pattern with the same expression?
Yeah, I can try it. Yeah.
Yeah, let's give it a go.
Actually, to the C.
There we go. So, what was that like?
Well, obviously, you know, it sounds good that way, but um, it felt nice. I don't. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you said it last time. I wondered if you were going to say if there was anything that bothers you about how, the way exactly it came out, or something. Like, for example, maybe it was a bit more than you wanted. I don't know.
Oh, yeah. I think. Well, the last chord, I'm not really sure how to end that one as or how to articulate that one as much as the prior three because well, I know by itself, if we were just playing this pattern, it'd have like a nice ending, but then it develops into something else with that open B there going into the A minor chord. So
Hmm. I like the way you're thinking. Yeah, that chord is facing in two directions. So it also has a
mhm.
future, and perhaps it has only a
Yeah, right.
past if you make it too gentle. So, but now we're really
Yeah.
thinking really intelligently about the harmonic structure. So how are you going to fix that? What are you going to do about that?
Um, well, maybe like the first half of the measure, you sort of resolve that, you make it gentle, and then like just towards the last beat or the last part of the measure is when you sort of start to enter into new territory. Like,
Ah, that's a fascinating idea. Yeah, because each chord is played
mhm.
twice,
Yeah,
and
exactly.
who's to say that when a chord is played twice, the intensity is the same each time?
Right.
Probably when you begin, like in many cases, you're playing the chord with a different color each time, aren't you? Later on in
Yeah,
the piece,
yeah.
you sometimes do a different
Mhm.
color, which means that that's your response to the fact that Bach plays each pattern twice in many places throughout the piece.
Mhm.
So probably when we begin this piece, I mean, what seems personally natural to me is think of this is that each time the chord is played the second time, it probably has a little less intensity than the first, more like an
Mhm.
echo. But I'm fond
Right.
of it. I'm kind of an echo guy. I often like hearing things in an echo the same way. when they're repeated. But when we get to the fourth measure, probably it's the reverse, right? I'm just kind of riffing on your ideas here. The C is going to, if I write on the screen here, we've got this all-important motion from C through B down to the A, which changes the nature of the chord. So, and what you could do is perhaps make sure that we hear that movement as having some purpose, so that the A minor chord in measure 5 has a little bit more intensity. And this was a suggestion I was going to make to you anyway, from your recording, that, you know, as the C kind of, the way a Baroque musician would have thought of the chord in measure 5 was not really as an A minor chord, so much as the initial C chord with the fifth change to a sixth, in order to make it more fluid and able to move, less stable. So more like a contrapuntal adjustment to the C chord than a change of root. All right, so I think we should get you to play, because I want to hear what you're going to do with all of your ideas.
Okay. Sorry, I kept going, but
Well, it's hard not to stop, isn't it?
yeah,
And
exactly. Yeah.
it's hard to yeah, and it was good to hear how you went into the F sharp, which is a major arrival in measure 6, because it's starting to make the music more intense and unstable, and taking it to other places. Okay, so now I think if you work, let me show you something. Now, what's on your screen now is the cello original in your key of C, right? So I put it into C so we could talk about it. And then in the other stuff, I've actually written out a harmonic reduction, what you might play. It's a pretty literal one. It follows the notes that Bach uses very, very closely. I might make another one some other time, which would emphasize a little bit more the fundamental voice leading motions, but that's for another talk. This one is very much something you can play, and if we were in the room together, I might play the chords while you play the prelude, and then we could swap places. And the idea is that whoever has the chords will probably find it easier to find a good shape, to find the drama of the harmony. And then whoever's playing Bach's actual music can then kind of bounce off what the continuo player is doing. And then we take the continuo player away, the chords away, and we're left with a beautiful performance of the Bach prelude. That's my idea. So, and so what I've done here is actually write it out. I think there's a lot of value. Like, you went to all the trouble of writing out the names of the chords, and I would urge you to go an extra step and actually write out the chords themselves, following both the bass and the upper voice and general harmonic content of the prelude. When we do that, let's, for example, go to the end. Now, it's clear that that the piece ends unexpectedly high, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Round about here, in measure 31, Bach lands on this note B, and then takes it up. Up to the high C, stays there, and eventually it resolves. So, how would you like to tell me that story? How does it go? what's the dynamic shape and the how would you shape that in performance?
Well, the part you just played, it starts with that big like chromatic move up,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that that's really obvious. That's just like just keeps getting more intense. You know what I mean?
Right.
Just louder and maybe a color that's a bit more like sharper towards the bridge maybe. But then you land back on the well, you do want like a pretty nice landing on that C. A good solid landing on that C chord. So, but then after that, you're sort of he adds that D again, sort of like the first chord. So I think it's just a solid landing on that C, but maybe that first C chord is a little softer than what comes after, like the C with the nine with the D in it, and then the G7 at the end. But so that's a little softer. But then after that, a little louder, a little more not sharp, but you know what I mean, a little more
Mm-hmm.
intense for the G7 at the end, because you want that really strong cadence from the G7 going to the C at the end.
Right. That was that. I thought that was a fantastic commentary. So, if I can sum up, um, in fact, if we start all the way back to here, where the where I've made that red mark,
Hmm.
we get to the B. It has a suspension at the beginning, but anyway, we get to the B. Gradually, it climbs up and then back down.
Yeah.
So, can we maybe suggest that that there's a general tendency to increase as it goes up high?
Right.
Da da dee da 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 dee da dee da dee da dee da dee da dee da 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 dee da. Oh, actually, I can do better than that. It only starts to rise up round about here, yeah.
Hmm.
Da dee da tum. Now I'm actually going to. We'll maybe talk about this in more depth another time, but I'm actually going to suggest that the climax of that motion is actually not so much the high G, but the arrival on the downbeat where the F is achieved.
Hmm.
Anyway, and that's partly because I hear there an implied pattern of suspensions that is set up and goes from that downbeat. And then we get back down to the B, and we're kind of back where we started. Then, as you say, there's a chromatic ascent, very impressive chromatic ascent, that actually
Right.
moves the B up a whole octave. So we've transported B up an entire octave, and now we're almost ready to cadence. But before Bach cadences, he elaborates this harmony in some interesting ways. First of all, a 6/4. The sixth then goes down to a fifth, but the fourth is held as a suspension. And then finally, the third goes down, a seventh is added, and then we resolve. And I think what you said was that maybe when the C becomes the suspension here, there's a
Hmm.
sense of really renewing the intensity there.
Right.
So we might slightly drop into the middle of the bar, but then really make sure that we get a good high C. Then it resolves, so maybe there's a sense of just dropping the sound a little bit. But then as the leading tone goes back up to the C, in some situations, like you always have a choice on final tonics. So sometimes you want to emphasize the repose,
Hmm.
right? And so you get quieter. We were doing that at the beginning of the piece. And other times you want to emphasize the triumph, right? And
Right.
here I think it's more of a triumph than
Yeah.
going to bed. So probably we just renew the intensity there. Now all of this is much easier to talk about when we're just looking at the chords, isn't it?
Hmm.
Yeah. So I'll play this for you first. I just want you to hear the chords. If I go from measure 31, I've got the. Then it goes up. Then then to this 6/4, then to this suspension. Then a little less, and then the achievement. And we could say that all of Bach's decorative elaboration of this chord sequence in some ways makes it a little easier, actually, not harder.
Right.
Because it allows you to really get inside each harmony and live in it like a little room and explore these levels of intensity. So, do you want to try? Why don't we go from that measure 31?
Okay.
And see if you can. I'm particularly interested in the climax at the end. That's where I really thought that last line you could definitely find more. So don't be afraid to play softly in order to give yourself room. Perhaps at the very beginning here.
31 playing the music or the chords there?
Well, I thought I'd have you play the music because I think just recite reading the chords is going to be.
Okay, good.
I'd rather give you you should work on that in your own time. Okay, yeah. So what was that like?
It's it wasn't perfect. I'll say that, but it is nice to have more of a roadmap, like a purpose. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Yeah.
I really think that. Now, I think what you'll find is that each time you play this passage, you can use that roadmap and you can make it more precise. You can also depart from it. Like I often find that in real life, playing in a performance, I might have the idea that okay, I have to bring more intensity here, but maybe I have the inspiration to like suddenly drop the intensity, like to make it intense in a different way, like to use hushed intensity. There's like all kinds of possibilities.
Mm-hmm.
Although I don't think I would ever want to play the end of this prelude without really getting very strong.
Yeah, yeah.
So I just think you're on your way now, right? If you can if you can actually play the chords, make this piece into a hymn, into a Bach chorale, and then shape that chorale. Then remember, we went through a phase where we're just playing the eighth notes.
Right.
Some version of the piece in eighth notes, so that you're kind of adding a little bit of that technical challenge. It's becoming more decorative, but you're not yet playing all of the 16th notes. And then, of course, you play Bach's piece as though somebody was playing those chords with all of that shaping underneath. Let's do one more fingering thing. I do think that if I come here to measure 37, now in the original cello version, this pedal G is an octave lower because it's an open string on the cello, and it's very easy on the cello to play on another string against it. Now, Stanley has kind of an interesting solution to playing it on the guitar in the key of C. Of course, G is available as an open string, but he's kind of come up with a very elaborate form of this passage, which involves putting the G up an octave and then having it be joined with the low G on the open string as the music reaches its climax.
Right.
But I just want you to remember that G is always on a different string in the cello original. And in Stanley's arrangement, it's still always on a different string. So when you get to this point here, I noticed that you're playing the upper voice on the same string, the E string, and the G on the same E string. And I want to encourage you to follow Stanley's fingering here and have them on two different strings.
Okay.
You want to take a quick look?
So would you put, I guess the G is now on the second string then?
Absolutely.
Okay, got it. Okay.
So the little finger is going to be on that G, and it's not going to lift up until we move to another note. Your thumb is on the third string, ready for those low Gs.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's 1, 1, 2, 3 on the first string. That's it. Then yes. Beautiful. Now the way it gets set up is kind of interesting because you've got your little finger, as we said, on the second string. How did it get there? Well, actually we slid up to it from the F sharp to G earlier on in the measure. And if I play that for you, it's a little bit, it's another place where maybe I have this theory that sometimes these more outrageous fingerings are things that you've kind of shied away from because they require the arm to be so mobile. And I think now that you're discovering that mobility in the arm, you're going to love a lot of these fingerings, especially in this arrangement because they're so integral sometimes to what he decided to do. So if we go from we got now, see my elbow? Well, you can't see my elbow at all. Let me move a bit further away. So we got, now my elbow's coming in. In a bit more. So by the time we got, see how the first finger is reaching back as though it was, if there were strings down here, there'd be like a bar. And it's not as much of a stretch as it looks because when fingers are sliding and others are down, they can actually passively extend and stretch out a lot more than you could if you were doing it actively. You want to give that a go?
Yeah. And then okay. Just gonna try it once more.
Wait, keep. Sorry, I hate to interrupt, but as soon as that little finger starts to slide up the second string, you don't lift it up until the end of the line.
Got it. Okay.
It's there. It's an anchor. That's the idea.
Right.
Yeah. If you did it again, you'd change a couple of things. Now, this kind of thing this kind of arm mobility requires, I think, it's really helpful if your torso is well supported. So I would encourage you to be right on the edge of your chair, so you're not sitting on your legs at all.
Mm-hmm.
So there's so you're ready actually just to stand up.
Okay.
Right? As opposed to, let me show you what I'm thinking of. Supposing I come back here. There's nothing wrong with sitting back in the chair per se. But often when we do that, maybe we just kind of slump down a little bit over the guitar. And if we wanted to stand up, we'd have to like, okay. A lot of stuff would have to happen. What I want is actually just to play the guitar. You just want your knees to go forward. The chair meets you as you're going into a squat. A guitar is added, and then the arms are free. And what I think I'm seeing, I know I can't see much of you over the Zoom screen, is that you could do with being a little bit more dynamic on the chair.
Okay.
I would actually encourage you right now to stand up.
Sure.
You'll be off the screen for a moment. And what are you sitting on? This, is it that chair behind you?
Yes, the green chair.
Yeah. Yes. Okay. So it's quite cushy and soft where it meets when you sit down, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So what you really need is a hard chair.
Okay.
With just a flat, hard surface to sit on.
Mm-hmm.
And what you'll find then is that you get much more of a response up your spine to be effortlessly upright than if you sit on something as soft as that. And so, but nevertheless, take your guitar and just look out, enjoy being in a standing position, as though you're about to walk out of the room. So you're dynamic, you're not thinking about sitting comfortably playing the guitar, you're just being Matt in the world. And then I would just like you to bend your knees so that you come down to the chair and the chair just meets you and supports you.
Sure.
Yeah. Good. And then in a very neutral, you're kind of in a neutral place. Now you already seem a little bit more dynamic and ready for action.
Right.
Does it seem different to you? And I think that your left arm is already going to be working a little bit differently and better.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's that sense of being alive and ready to come up out of the chair affects the way everything works. Okay, Matt. Great to work with you today.
Well, thank you for everything.